Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to take the opposite approach of Chair Murray. I'm going to submit some comments for the record and go straight to questions. So it's as usual, we're complimenting one another. Let me start with Ukraine, Mr. Secretary. There are those who view our support of Ukraine as an either-or proposition for our national security. And they argue that either the United States focuses on pushing back Russian aggression in Ukraine, or the United States focuses on countering the rising influence of China. I don't agree with that assessment. I view the two challenges as interconnected and believe that Russia and China are working in concert to reshape the international order to our disadvantage. Two questions for you. First, what message would it send to China and Russia were we to abandon Ukraine at this point? And second, please articulate the case for why our involvement in Ukraine is in America's national interest.
Madam Vice Chair, thank you very much for that question. First of all, I fully agree with you. And let me put it this way. Because it does go, and in effect, the second part of your question actually goes right to the first part. Why is this in our interest? Why is it profoundly in the interest of the United States to do what we've been doing, which is to continue to stand with Ukraine as it defends itself against this Russian aggression, to continue to exert pressure on Russia to end the aggression, and to strengthen our own alliance, defensive alliance, NATO, in case that aggression spreads? It's two reasons. Fundamentally, first of all, I think Americans do not like to see big nations bullying smaller ones. That's something that sticks in our craw, and we see the horrific abuses and atrocities that are being committed, and that's something that I think Americans focus on very intensely. But fundamentally, the reason is this. If we allow the Russian aggression in Ukraine to go forward with impunity, if we allow the very basic rules of the road for how countries relate to one another that were established after 2 world wars and that focus, among other things, on making sure that countries respect the territorial integrity of other countries, respect their independence, respect their sovereignty. If we allow that to be violated with impunity by Russia and Ukraine, we open a Pandora's box around the world where would-be aggressors everywhere look at this and say, if they can get away with it, I can too. And that is a world of conflict. That is a world of war. That is a world that we've been in before. And we've had to come in and do something about it. But it's not a world that we want. So the stakes in Ukraine go well beyond Ukraine. And to your point, I think it has a profound impact in Asia, for example. Everyone is watching to see how we and the world responds to this aggression. And they'll draw their lessons from it. One of the reasons that there are so many partners involved in this from Asia is precisely because, even though this is happening half a world away, they see the stakes for them. One of the leading countries in our coalition to support Ukraine is Japan. South Korea is playing an important role. Australia is too. And they see the stakes. I think if China is looking at this, and they are looking at it very carefully, they will draw lessons for how the world comes together or doesn't to stand up to this aggression.
Thank you. And let me encourage you and other members of the administration, including the president, to make that case to the American people much more forcefully so that we do not see this continuing troubling decline in public support for our efforts in Ukraine. It goes way beyond the doing the right thing from a moral or humanitarian viewpoint. It's very much in our interests. Let me follow up to some extent on Senator Graham's questions on fentanyl. We recently had a tragic case in Maine where a 13-year-old girl with no history of drug abuse died from taking a pill that was laced with fentanyl. So this is a tragedy that affects each and every one of our states. The International Narcotics Control and Law Enforcement Account works to reduce the production and trafficking of fentanyl and other drugs through its drug supply reduction program. So the president's budget proposes $20 million for this program, which is only a $3 million increase above this year's level, despite the flood of fentanyl, the precursors of which come from China, go to Mexico, and then into this country to poison our people. So this disappoints me, and I will ask you, do you think you're requesting sufficient funding? If you do, what other measures are you taking to specifically address the threat of fentanyl flowing into our country?
Thank you very much for that question, because I absolutely share the priority that you, Senator Graham, I think everyone on this committee is putting on this problem. And as Senator Graham rightly said, the number one killer of Americans, 18 to 49, is fentanyl, synthetic opioids. And so this is, it needs to be a national priority. And I think the way that we're approaching this is really a whole of spectrum approach, by which I mean this. Obviously, we're doing work at home to try to reduce demand, protect our own people, get them the treatment and antidotes they need. But that's not the answer. What we have to, it's part of it, but it's not the answer. We talked a minute ago about border security and technology, where we can do a lot more to effectively intercept things coming into the country. But that's not enough. We have to be, and we are, working to disrupt the transnational criminal organizations that are engaged in making this stuff and moving this stuff. And we need to be working with, as we are with Mexico, to take down the labs, to take down the enterprises. And we need, to your point, to be more effective in preventing the diversion of illicit precursors into the illicit fabrication of synthetic opioids like fentanyl. So we've done a number of things to intensely focus on this. With Mexico, we actually are working in very close collaboration. They have now, over the last year, arrested dozens of first and second tier transnational criminal organization leads. They've seized record amounts of fentanyl, but it's a huge C. But that's going up. They disrupted production facilities with our assistance. We have our financial intelligence unit working with theirs to disrupt the financing of these networks. And we have now, as a result of work that I did with my colleagues, a joint synthetic drug action plan with Mexico that expands cooperation with them, from law enforcement to the regulatory agencies in Mexico to the trade and health organizations that are really important. Second, more broadly, for the first time, I just came a couple of months ago from the G20 foreign ministers meeting in preparation for the leaders. For the first time, the United States got this on the full agenda of the G20. So these are the most important economies in the world that have a real role and stake in different ways in this. And we'll be establishing a working group in the G20 to work on this. Third, from the perspective of the State Department as well, one of the things that we're working on is building a coalition on a voluntary basis at first to tackle another aspect of this problem, and that's the illicit diversion of legal precursors. This is a big problem, as you know. There are things that we can do much more effectively: sharing information, labeling, putting in place know your customer protocols around the world, including with China, to make sure that companies that are, again, involved in the production of perfectly licit precursors do not have them diverted into the fabrication of synthetic opioids. So all of that, we're coming together. Now, as to the resources, Madam Vice Chair, very happy to work with you very closely to make sure that we are properly resourced for this. I could not agree with you more. This is a number one priority.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. My strong suspicion is that an amendment to increase the funding would get unanimous support. Senator Shaheen.